I can prove that I speak better English than your contestant's name is Sang Yunjung. I can guarantee that. You know how quickly one can actually understand any sentence and sound by spoken in English. Let's try and do it. I can guarantee it's not my ego. It's a factual statement. I can actually, scout hundreds of Americans.
George W. Bush and Michelle Obama being friends.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that Americans are shocked by their friendship?
Well, I think we've become to a place that is incredibly tribalized. And George W. Bush today, as your lead-in said, I worked for him in both elections in the course of this. He is a relic. George W. Bush, if he showed at a meeting of the RNC or a meeting of CPAC, would be booed today. He probably wouldn't even be invited. And I would hesitate.
So you know what? He actually focuses on this and to polarize a culture in America. The problem is in this tiny segment, you actually saw former President George W. Bush hanging out with beautiful former First Lady Michelle Obama. Their friendship was pretty much shocking. At the time, it was acceptable. But this type of a partisanship truly prevented us from even imagining this type of a personal bonds between the Republican Party member and the Democratic. This is really like the friendship between Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Scalia. Why? Because in this new branded Republican Party, there is no such thing as across the border or the party line crossing bondage or collaboration. He is Mr. Dowd was the person who actually advised President George W. Bush throughout the presidential campaign, so he knew it. He would actually be a relic from the ancient era. In this newly changed, or even after this seismic event that took place after the emergence of such a radical leader named Donald J. Trump, in this new era, former President George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush, they would have never been invited to the Republican Party convention or even the CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee. There will be no such thing. Because this reflects how tribalized and polarized America's party politics. There is no middle ground. No one wants to meet in the middle. They wants to go their own way. They wants to stick to their own guns, no matter what. There is no converging point that could actually bring them together. There is no America, but there is a Republican Party. There is a Democratic Party. This type of a division between them would be so deeply ingrained. No matter how hard they try. No matter how these former leaders might try to heal the wound, to bring the nation behind the common cause, this type of a bipartisanship is no longer there. There are many congressional members, like Susan Collins, even from the Republican Party, who could at least recall the very fond memories from the old days. Back in those days, Republican Party members, they might not actually, share the common things with the Democratic parties. They might actually not see eye to eye on so many legislative issues, but they still like to, hang out. They would like to share lunch together. They would like to go out for lunch together across a party line. This type of bipartisanship was conceivable. But in this new era, even President George W. Bush, once upon a time, he was a poster boy of a polarized partisanship. He would be right now considered as an old ancient relic. Why? Because even this type of burial busting friendship would be almost unthinkable. In this new era, in this new epoch, the Republican Party is not the one any leaders used to know. Ever since the appearance of Donald Trump, the Republican Party has been branded as the radical fanatics. There would be a no compromise, and they've been brewing more of a conspiracy theories while embracing such a radical groups like Kuan Yeung or Proud Boys, if not officially, right? That's what has been said. It's very obvious. And can I actually go back to things that I heard before? Please, let me actually finish this one. This one, I only actually heard this once. I wanted to talk about this all the time, but every single time I wanted to talk, the video would be cut off, or somebody actually hampered my progress. So I could not actually deliver this at once, but let me actually say this. According to Manu Raj's report, there was indeed there was indeed an exchange of blows between Mitch McConnell and the deep-pocketed donors. Because right now, as you have probably noticed, there is a significant rift between the corporate America and the Republican Party. Once upon a time, they were like the Siamese twins. They always go hand in hand because they share certain mutual ties, as you probably notice. They were like this, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Because once the Republican parties would be campaign financed by corporate America, and corporate America would actually join, their fringe benefits, like, tax cuts, like this, right? Everything wasn't working well, but, in recent days, Republican parties were making such an heinous and horrendous arguments based upon conspiracies and hoaxes. So, corporate America is, feeling estranged from this type of, non-profitable activities. They do know, and many of corporations do know, and this would actually at least make them very much alienated from regular consumers. Then they would, these corporate America is all about profit making. They would always follow dollar signs. Ka-ching, ka-ching. They would have definitely wanted to at least do whatever it makes money. Then they, the more they would actually stay with the Republican, the more they would actually hear this, sound of people living out of this sinking ship. Because America's public does not embrace this conspiratorial arguments like the Kuan Yeung or white supremacy or election fraud. Then they should actually, take immediate action. It's not about the corporate morality, but, through profit-oriented cost-benefits analysis, literally prevented them from even actually, befriending the Republican Party or making friendship with the Republican Party any further. And what's worse is, the Republican Party lost its grip on presidency. Then who is in the White House? Democratic Party. Hey, let's try to truly leave the sinking ship. They act like mice coming out of the sinking ship, right? Because it's really actually going down. We do not want to drown ourselves. So, Emmanuel Raju actually said that his colleagues, like, Mike Warren and Alex Rogers, they actually, were all informed of the situation by contacting members of the Congress inside the, secret room, so they could actually verify this type of argument. And, the actual burst out by Mitch McConnell got really intensified immediately following from the Major League Baseball's decision to pull out all the scheduled All-Star Players game is really the one stacked up with the A-list star players, right? But these type of events could have happened in Atlanta, right? But the thing is, or any type of star-studded baseball events could have taken place in Atlanta if and only if this, very controversial Georgia election reform had not been passed. However, this Georgia election law is really controversial because it was designed to discriminate African American voters as well as many of voters of color, right? Because they were treated differently than other Caucasians by being asked to verify their residency, right? I mean, these type of elaborated labyrinth has been designed to discount the importance of voting rights by the voters of color. What can we say further? As a part of a boycott, many of the corporate America entities, many of the corporations, or many of the corporate entities, or many of the corporate entities, they decide to distance themselves from the state of Georgia. This is really a one popular way to at least, say no or express their strong disapproval against certain states' legislative decision. Do you remember what happened when... No, I'm not lying. If you ever actually remember what happened years ago, when the state of Georgia, the same state, when the state of Georgia and also state of Alabama, they actually subsequently passed the legislative to make abortion in the state much difficult. This type of stricter and a narrower interpretation of abortion laws would eventually put many women's lives on the line or in danger. That was really the reason, as a sign of a boycott, Netflix actually pulled off their filming in the state of Georgia and the state of Alabama. I remember that. In this, capitalistic society, many of our corporate Americans decide to sign off their disapproval or dissatisfaction with a certain with a certain states, by actually doing away with their contracts with a certain state. If they ever wanted to say no, then they would actually pull off the existing contract. They would actually decide to deed to the existing contractual terms and conditions by revoking them. In that way, they can actually express their strong disapproval for a certain controversial legislature like this, right? I don't really need to think twice about it. Because, there was allegedly, there was allegedly a promise for All-Star Players game that was supposed to take place in the city of Atlanta. That was actually, canceled as a sign of boycott to at least boo the Georgia's recent election law, which was nothing but voter suppression, a gimmick for voter suppression. That means that's really a modern day's disenfranchisement. That's what has been said.
.com/prep. New projects means new project managers. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. The moment you sponsor a job on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates from our resume database. Claim your $75 credit when you post your first job at Indeed.com/home.
So if you use Indeed, you can actually multiply your chances of being hired. How? Because your resume will be shortlisted on top of the rest, if and only if you meet the qualification. This type of priority-based screening, uniquely adopted by Indeed.com, helps you to find the job you want immediately. So if you ever actually sign up for the contract right now by uploading your curriculum vitae in search of your job, you can actually claim $75 of free coupon. We can actually credit you up to $75. For instance, if you need to actually pay $175, $75 wouldn't be canceled because we can actually redeem you or a coupon that could immediately help you to experience a $75 discount. This type of credit depositing is almost equivalent to the cancellation of the $75 as a discount, right? So you know what? If you sign up for the account today by uploading your curriculum vitae or resume, and if you really actually jump into job searching using Indeed.com, you can actually claim $75 today. Immediately redeem this coupon, make the most out of this, because your resume will be shortlisted. Your resume. It means, you know what, anything you uploaded will be prioritized because you're the one who we care about. It's really easy. That would actually be placed on top of all the rest of applicants, right? Das meint ihr eigener Curriculum vitae wird priorisiert als ein Vorhang. Warum ist das so? Weil Indeed.com hat eine sehr exklusive datenorientierte Systeme, dass ihr eigene Chancen hervorhebte werden machen könnte.
The office. Joining us now is Laura Jarrett. She's our CNN correspondent, and she's also the anchor of Early Start. So many companies are wrestling with this question.
So many companies grappling with this right now, Brianna. Can they make their employees get vaccinated? Now, legally, the answer is probably yes. The NFL is already doing this for many of its employees, whereas companies like Amtrak are instead trying to use certain incentives like extra pay to nudge people along. But look, it's a complicated issue because you have to look at federal law, state law, and already we see lawsuits being filed across the country.
really?
So let's start on the federal side. There's nothing currently on the books prohibiting an employer from mandating a vaccine for its workers. And plenty of companies have required workers to get other vaccines in the past. Think about something like smallpox or influenza. Courts say that's fine. So what does a company do in the context of COVID-19? Well, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that's a mouthful, but it's the agency that enforces federal workplace laws. And it put out some guidance late last year reminding employers if you're trying to follow other non-discrimination laws, you need to provide exemptions for two groups when it comes to mandating a vaccine. One, those with religious objections to the vaccine, and two, people who might have a medical condition that could make taking the vaccine dangerous.
difficult.
But if you're someone in one of those two categories, doesn't mean you're coming into the office. The EEOC says this, quote, it would be lawful for the employer to exclude the employee from the workplace. However, this does not mean the employer may automatically terminate the worker. The guidance goes on to say, quote, the employee may be entitled to certain accommodations, such as performing the current position
at home,
remotely.
you know,
So
that
bottom
would be
line
possible.
here, Brianna, it's messy. This is going to be a little bit of a negotiation, I think.
Does this guidance cover both state and federal laws?
No. So right now, all we're
We're
talking
talking about
about
federal
is the
law.
federal side.
Yes, I.
State law, though, is where the action is at right now. And here's the big wrinkle. Remember, the 3 vaccines available in the U.S. right now only have what's known as emergency use authorization. These drugs do not actually have full FDA approval. So some workers have already filed suit against their employers for trying to mandate the vaccine. And their argument is that the risks of these drugs aren't fully known yet. Yes, they've been tested, but it would be unfair to make workers get a shot in this context. Again, there's no federal law saying that that's illegal, but a handful of states are actually now debating legislation to prohibit companies rather, from firing their workers based on their immunization status. So if those laws get passed, companies would, of course, have to follow that state law. So this is the space to watch.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot developing here. Thank you so much for breaking it down.
Yeah, this is really helpful news. I love it. I love it. This is the thing that I really love. Excuse me, can I explain everything? Because I love Laura and I can understand her clear message really, really clearly. EOCC, you know, it's a really, truly a mouthful. It's a tongue twister for me. It's really difficult, but let me explain what's happening here. The problem is, you know what, the situation is about to actually gain. I mean, not really gain. This is about to actually create waves across the nation. It's true, not just in the United States, but every other developed country will face this problem one way or another. So it's a very relevant issue. So I feel very I'm motivated to explain every little aspect of it. So will employers be able to ask their employees to get vaccinated? That means, with that, will there be any mandate issued by employers to ask their employees to get vaccinated. Will there be any legal justification for that? That's a real question. Would that be legally acceptable for any companies to ask their employees to be vaccinated at all costs? Otherwise, they would be kicked off. They would be fired. Would that be justifiable? That's a real question, right? So let me actually, explain every little detail. So right now, the state is really, the state law is right now going through a transitional phase. So it is at action. So I have to say, well, first we need to focus on the federal law. Technically, there is no federal law that is saying that it is illegal, right? However, there is a lot of messy issues. But so let me actually go back to my own writing. But indeed, companies like the Amtrak or the NFL are already actually taking actions to mandate their own employers to be vaccinated. But Amtrak does not actually use any punitive actions. Rather, they would actually give extra dollars to any employees who might actually get vaccinated. So this is not mandatory for the Amtrak. Amtrak is the U.S. railway service, German's Deutsche Bahn. Yeah. But the NFL, do you really know the NFL? What is that? The National Football League. O.J. Simpson is a really player of American football. Right? My husband's favorite team is Redskins. The NFL literally mandated its players to get vaccinated. If you really want to stay in the league, you have to actually present your status of immunization. Otherwise, you would be considered as a germ spreader, virus spreader, super spreader. So you would be fired or your contract can be revoked. This would be, somehow obligatory, right? But the Amtrak uses a very different approach. They would rely on carrot side instead of a peitschen. Peitschen of English? A stick, right? Normally there is such a thing as the sticks and the carrot management, right? Na Karotte und Peitschen, right? So if you really actually work as a conductor of the train for the Amtrak, and you do not really want to get vaccinated, but you can see the dollar signs if you really get vaccinated, because you can actually probably earn like $20 or $100. So simply for those people who actually decide to, for simply those who decide to get vaccinated, then they would actually be given money. The monetary benefits will be followed. You like it, right? Then you'd like to at least roll up your sleeves and then get a jab in your arm happily, right? Because this will be redeemed monetarily. How great this might be, right? Don't you not love it? You're gonna be paid additionally. And what's that? Let me actually go back to the law. So far, there had been many precedents concerning the vaccination and the employer's struggle. However, indeed, throughout the U.S. history, there are other vaccines that were actually legally mandated by companies or employers or higher roles. What are those? The smallpox, which is really chicken pox, and the flu, serious case of influenza, they're all actually being demanded to be vaccinated. So patients should be inoculated against this type of highly contagious disease like chickenpox and the smallpox and the flu. In the United States, the public school requires, complete vaccination against the rubella, meningitis, or chickenpox, or measles, right? So, there are certain companies that truly indeed specify or stipulate this type of mandatory vaccination, and these type of decisions were legally acceptable in the context. However, when it comes to coronavirus, there is no clarified federal law. That's really the reason why Laura said nothing is on the book. That means there is no specified stipulation or clause in the United States Constitution federally to recognize any illegality of mandated vaccination. The mandatory vaccination against the coronavirus could be illegal. However, there is no binding clause in the Constitution that clearly suggests its own illegality. Technically, it's not 100% unconstitutional because there is no binding clause that clearly suggests its illegality. It's lawlessness. No, that's really the thing. So nothing is on the books. So many companies are grappling with the situation. That means that they're having difficulties or they're wrestling with the situation. They really need to actually, figure out how they would act to the circumstances. Everything is really murky. That's really the reason why Brianna Killer used, when many companies are wrestling with the situation, that means that they're actually struggling with it. They're staggering with it. And Laura Jarrett said many companies are literally grappling with it. It's really like, they would remain in the dark because there is no serious guideline that could actually clarify their code of conduct. So everything is very complicated here because, there is no black and white clarity in this zone. So if we ever first actually look at the federal law, so right now, let's try to actually focus on the nationwide applicable law. There had been a certain precedence concerning other diseases like chicken pox or smallpox. That's exactly the same thing, and influenza. That would actually, allow companies to at least ask their employees to be vaccinated. Then these type of decisions were somehow accepted in the realm of constitutional law. That was acceptable in the past. However, there is such a gray zone concerning the coronavirus vaccine mandate. So, if you ever actually look to the EOCC, it's a really mouthful word. That means it's difficult to at least, explain everything. Yeah. But if you ever actually, look at this organization, which has really a very decisive role in setting down rules and standards for employment in the United States for equal opportunity amongst all different employees, regardless of their backgrounds or health conditions, to maintain equity and equality, right, in the workforce or in the labor market. If you ever actually see this, technically companies that could have possibly ask people to be vaccinated, that's acceptable. However, there should be recognition for exceptional cases. There are two major categories that should be at all costs secured in order to implement this mandate. What are those? Religious grounds should be accepted. If you're really a believer of a Jehovah's Witness, then you do not really want to get vaccinated. Or some of the evangelicals are saying that, we're not going to get vaccinated. Who knows what would happen? This is against God's creation. Like this. They would actually drop out of a mandatory vaccination, citing religious reasons that would be feasible, right? In this case, we have to think about the practice of religion because religious freedom is really the pivotal clause in the U.S. Constitution that's guaranteed by the First Amendment. So no matter what happens, we have to revere and respect the religious freedom, the constitutional religious freedom, I mean. And number two, medical reasons should also be equally considered. Think about it. If you ever suffer from very rare case of a genetic disease, but this type of a medical condition could it be intensified or exacerbated if you ever actually get this COVID-19 shot, right? This kind of condition, these kind of conditions should be exceptionally handled. So, you should, if you really want to embrace this mandate, compulsory coronavirus vaccination, then you need to at least keep two back doors open for people who might not actually, join you for different reasons. Number one, for religious reasons. Certain people who actually, are very much committed to religious faith, they might not actually, they might not feel drawn to this vaccination then you should actually respect their religious freedom. And number two, if certain people might actually have pre-existing health conditions that might not actually allow them to be vaccinated, then these cases also be equally respected. All right, these two cases. And this is, there are many different cases related to workforce law relations. This is really like workers' compensation and the workforce law, or even, actual labor law that could immediately be applicable to labor force in America's corporations and the factories and all different job places, right? That's what EOCC overviews, right? All things about employment, including the OSHA, the occupational health condition, right? OSHA and the EOCC, they're really the, authoritative voice when it comes to dictating the job conditions as well as the safety and the rules and regulations of everyday workers across the nations. Whether you're on the payroll, whether you're temporary workers, or whether you're seasonal farm workers, doesn't matter, okay? So the thing is, even in addition to that, we have to actually think about the possible accommodation. What does that mean? There is a certain specified case saying that it's okay for any company to possibly oblige its employee. It's really okay for any company to possibly oblige its employees and workers to get vaccinated. However, for whatever reason, these type of conditions cannot be met, then this would never be a proper cause to immediately terminate the contract by firing that worker. Think about it. Imagine in your company there is a worker named David. He has no religious reason, or he has no health conditions like diabetes, or he has no respiratory symptoms, or he's not a believer of Jehovah's Witness or 7 Days Adventist or like that. He's not even evangelical. He's not really from, Sunni Islam, right? That means he has no specific reason, but he doesn't really like to be vaccinated. He doesn't really like to share this reason because it's confidential. However, one thing for sure, he just wants to be exempted from the mandatory vaccination. He wants to be in an exceptional case. Then, would that be enough for the company of David to fire him or let him go or give him the pink slip? Would that be okay? Would that be justifiable? No. There is really a certain precedent understanding. This could actually be the legal litigation because, nationwide, there is no bounding there is no absolutely clarified federal law. No. However, there is a EOCC guideline clearly explaining that as a precedent case. In the case of non-compliance with the mandatory vaccination, this cause would not be enough and sufficient to terminate the labor contract by giving out a pink slip to that person. You cannot actually get someone sacked just because this David does not really want to get vaccinated. He doesn't particularly belong to these two exceptional cases that should normally be reserved and respected at all costs. Religious one and a pre-existing health condition. He doesn't actually meet those of cases. However, he still wants to be non-vaccinated. He doesn't want to be inoculated. He wants to keep this reason to himself alone. In this case, what would happen? Why? Why can't it be a ground for termination? Why can't it be a just reason for his removal? In this case, the company of David, at least what should do, it's best by finding the alternative solution to that. By offering, additional job place, or he would be segregated from the rest of people, or he would actually be allowed to work from home, or there should be an alternative accommodation to settle the issue, because he could not actually be accepted inside the company because, he could be a super spreader who would actually ruin everyone's condition because, except him, the rest of the people in the company, for instance, have already actually been fully vaccinated against the coronavirus. In that case, David should be allowed to be inside the company as a regular worker, could truly put the entire company's health in jeopardy, right? This could be possible, right? This is a really very visible idea. Then in that case, would that be just a ground for the company to let him go or fire him or give him a clean sleep or even and get him sacked or give him a heave-ho? Do you even actually know this expression? Give him a heave-ho? Heave-ho? Then you can actually let him go? Now, that's not really necessarily the case. It could actually be very litigious. It's full of a possibility for legal controversies. But one thing one can say that, at least, the company is recommended to do one's best in finding alternative solutions to that, to at least mitigate the circumstances or accommodate the circumstances by meeting David's need in the middle. The company is asked to come up with the ingenious solution, ingenious method, maybe offering him completely sequestered spot in the company. For instance, if there is a company's basement facility, then there should be a sequester particle which would shut him away from the rest of the company, so he would have no chance he would have no chance to contact or interact with other people, or he would never contact other people or interact with or hang out with other people, right? And that way he could still maintain his employment at the company, or he could actually be allowed to work from home. Yeah, he would be, literally, teleworking person, right? At least, when the company is recommended to find different solution or different venues that would actually give a way to David's employment. That could not be the immediate reason why the company can justify the immediate removal of David. David could not be immediately, without even any meditation or mediation, be fired. That means that there would be a mediating period or alternative solution to at least accommodate the situation from both the sides. This could never actually sufficiently give reason powerful enough to let him go. Right? That's really the thing. And when we actually turn to the United States, all 50 different states, since this vaccination is really all about legal justification, so it's a very, very tricky. But if you ever actually look to the states, the situation is much, much more complicated. Many of the states are actually, coming up with a solution that might actually best serve their interest. They're actually already being pretty much well mobilized to at least pass the bill. They're underway to pass the bill or adopt the bill. They're somehow, fidgeting with the certain legal options, right now. But the thing is, at a state level, it's more like practical issue. What does that mean? When if you ever actually think about what would possibly happen at a state level, it becomes much more practical because it deals with real employees and real companies that you would actually, experience a clash over in between, right? This would be a full confrontation. There are certain people who might actually say this. Indeed, there are many litigations against the companies who actually indeed, put the screws on many of the workers to get vaccinated. Because, if you don't actually get vaccinated, there will be certain type of disadvantages. And certain companies, just simply based upon the state laws, they are indeed thinking about either removing these employees or even actually coming up with the disadvantage that would actually punish these employees who refuse to get vaccinated. Because of this, many of employees already actually, bear arms by bringing these cases to court. What is the rationale behind their argument? Can you specify that? Yes. So far, what we've been actually experiencing is this. All three vaccines in the United States, yeah, I don't really know about other countries' cases, but all three vaccines in the United States are actually, treatable. They're because they were indeed authorized by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. However, this has been done under the emergency usage authorization. That means, because of the very colossal size of the pandemic crisis, given the immensity of the coronavirus pandemic, the Food and Drug Administration, in close cooperation with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, issued authorizations for all three different vaccines in the United States. However, these are only for emergency purposes. This is called the EUA, Emergency Usage Authorization. This is not under regular system. These authorizations have never been done under normal conditions. That's really the concern for many people. What if this vaccine would eventually create certain side effects? What if, after 10 years, people somehow suffer from, unexpected conditions that were just actually, dismissed by the FDA because they were in a rush, because they were in a hurry. At the time, they were under pressure, so they worked too fast. They didn't really recognize, or they failed to account for these hidden aspects of the vaccines from Moderna, or the BioNTech, Pfizer, or Johnson & Johnson, or AstraZeneca. Now, right now, Johnson & Johnson on hold, so AstraZeneca. But in the United States, AstraZeneca is only, not that I know. Yeah. But J&J. But at least all three of them, they were actually authorized by the EUA, Emergency Usage Authorization. That means that they were actually given green light because of the immensity of the coronavirus pandemic. This is really, probably done under enormous pressure mounting, because the entire fate of humanity would be about to experience its downfall and decline if we do not take immediate action. That was really the sentiment and estimation. Maybe that type of rush. I mean, there's words like this, and fools rush, where angels tread, right? Certain employees who really actually don't like to get vaccinated, they are worried about their health condition. They're more like, really extremely precautious about their health condition, to the degree of being hypochondriac. Or this is true, but they actually literally file a lawsuit against the company, which actually demands them to actually get vaccinated. Each company they work for separately wants them to get vaccinated. So, many of employees across the nation literally sue their own employers. It's true. Why? Because, they were worried about the possible side effects of the vaccine. They do not appreciate this, authorization under emergency. What if this was, not fully approved thoroughly? What if this would not be examined or scrutinized? What if, later there were unexpected side effects would turn up? How can you actually possibly guarantee that there will be no side effects or negative aspects that might actually respond to individuals' conditions differently? And these are really the concerns. So, at a state level, there are already, many of different hustlings and bustlings to at least adopt legislative works, but most of them are siding with the workers. So in that way, no workers would be unfairly fired or removed from the workplace just because they never actually wanted to get vaccinated. According to Laura Jarrett's report, many of the state laws are indeed designed and they're about to be passed in favor of workers, so workers' discrimination could be minimized. Even if they opt out of vaccination, against the company's recommended policy, they might not actually get disadvantaged or discriminated just simply because of the vaccine status. The immunization status should never be the single cause to justify the removal of employees, non-vaccinated employees. That's really the trend. That's what is trending in this, state law legislation, according to Laura Jarrett's statement. But the thing is, the states are actually at action. The state's law is about to be formulated. We're actually, we're waiting for that with a bated breath, because no one really can be so certain about it. But there are, certain moves, from this state and that state. Laura didn't really specify very specific states, so I cannot actually say any further, right? It's really digest. Yeah, I think I had to deliver everything, but let me think about it, because I've been actually kind of... Yeah, employment compensation. The equal treatment of the Occupational Compensation Committee. OSHA is really Office of... OSHA is what? Occupational Safety Hazard Association, right? EOCC. Let me think about it. So you know what? I would like to give my final closing argument to at least see whether something is missing or not. Yeah, this is interesting. So in the United States, this is really a hefty battle between employees and employers, right? If you're really operating a company, you're desperate to have everyone vaccinated so no one would actually ruin the entire public health of the company, right? That would be disastrous. Then we think about it. If you are operating a small shop and you actually hire 5 people and they're on the payroll, but one person who refuses to get vaccinated, somehow because of this non-immunization, the rest of the 5 people get contracted with COVID-19, and the company should actually shut down for a while, then this would be a huge loss, right? Because your other employees could file a lawsuit against you for this, public health negligence like this. Anything can possibly be done. So if you're an employer, you're at all costs wanting to actually literally have everyone in your company immunized thorough against the coronavirus, right? Indeed, in the U.S. history, in the modern days history, there were certain, acceptable mandates that were not actually making any friction with the Constitution, because the court system truly gave a nod to this type of mandatory vaccination in compliance with the EOCC's ruling, right? And the EOCC's employment, this is really the equal treatment for the employment. It's really in a close collaboration with OSHA to guarantee the actual health and condition of the workers, right? Yeah. So vaccines for smallpox and influenza flu or chickenpox, these are really acceptable cases. These vaccines mandates or compulsory vaccinations for these diseases, due to the highly contagious nature of them, were indeed respected, right? And in the United States, there are certain companies who are already adopting this mandatory vaccination policy. Number 1, the NFL. The NFL is a National Football League. It's just for American football, right? They need to actually have a closer physical contact between athletes. That's the reason they ask all the athletes to be vaccinated at all costs, right? This has been the mandate. However, the Amtrak does not rely on this type of compulsive and compulsory prerequisite. Rather, that means in the Amtrak, the America's railway system really wants to use bonbon to lure people to get vaccinated. He just really wants to rely on a carrot, because he wants to hand out carrots to people to motivate them to be vaccinated. So what are those carrots? Ka-ching, the green cabbages. Yeah, you can actually, get more money if you get vaccinated. You can actually redeem coupon after, getting vaccinated. You can actually get a coupon that you can actually redeem this. No, they're going to give you money. They're going to, they're going to incentivize the vaccine immunization. This is what has been said. So, if you really are the company, you might actually, feel worried. It's really an option to choice, tell the truth. Even if you want to mandate the vaccination, you're still afraid of getting sued by employers. So what are your chances to be sued? If you, this is really the case. Will employers be able to mandate the coronavirus vaccination? Or would that be enough cause for them to fire the non-vaccinated employers? That's really the question on the table, right? I mean, these are really the questions on the table. But the thing is, if you ever actually look, but the thing is, you have to consider both the sides. Number one, the federal law and the state law. These are really the two branches that you need to consider. But state law normally involves a very specified and individualized conditions depending upon where you live, so it's very complicated, but let me focus on the federal law first. But in terms of the federal, nationwide recognized law, there is no stipulation that clearly dictates what employers should do and should not do. Because there is nothing on the book. On the book means there is no registered stipulation that could clearly hammer out a verdict for any non-vaccinated employer. No. But the thing is, in the history, there are legally acceptable mandates for the vaccinations against certain diseases. What are those? Chickenpox and influenza. And these kind of highly contagious diseases were recognizably acceptable. Right? Yeah. But there are certain conditions that must be upheld. If you really want to force employers to be vaccinated by enforcing this mandatory vaccine policy, at least you need to open two possibilities. You need to at least keep two doors open. You need to at least keep two of these back doors open. Where are these? Number one, the religious reason. So there are certain people, based upon the religious faith, they opt out of vaccination. They think that this would actually be against their indoctrinated dogma of the church or the mosque. So they decide not to be vaccinated. They could be, follower of a certain religious sect whose teaching would be against this type of public health policy, right? If that is really the case, you should somehow give a leeway to this person, because of this type of conscious objector. You should also recognize their religious freedom, because the religious freedom is the First Amendment-oriented rights, equally guaranteed for each and every citizen in the United States, right? So number two, the medical conditions. If you really have a pre-existing conditions, then you should actually, you should not get vaccinated, because no one can seriously guarantee that this would not come into conflict with your health conditions. in case you get vaccinated. So if that would be the case, you can probably ask your boss to allow you not to be vaccinated, right? So this type of medical condition could possibly be another exception that would be relatively feasible, because these two conditions should be respected in the case of a mandatory vaccine policy, right? If any employer wants to implement the mandatory vaccine policy, at least, certain exceptions should be accepted based upon religious reasons or health condition, orientations. These are really the guidelines from the EOCC, right? Because it's really about protecting the rights of workers in the workforce or labor force, how to actually better protect and preserve the recognition of the human rights at the workplace. That's what has been said here, right? That's what EOCC does in cooperation with the OSHA, right? Also, if there would be a certain person who might not really want to get vaccinated, even after these exceptions, one might not actually fit into a certain category, but one still wants to remain unvaccinated, then there should be certain mitigation. You can never actually immediately fire this person just simply because of the vaccine status. That could actually induce additional litigations. That could plant the seeds for more of a legal disputations. That's really the reason why you should actually think twice about immediate removal of a certain worker who refuses to get vaccinated. Because, the EOCC also has a certain precedent case clarifying its position on this, saying that there should be certain accommodation to at least meet the non-vaccinated employees' demand in the middle. One cannot actually immediately fire this employee. That's what has been said. That means you can actually quarantine this person, or you can actually sequester this person by creating a certain completely separated entity inside the company. Maybe there would be a certain space inside the company's basement, so he or she would be in forever and more quarantine, so no workers would ever have a contact with this person, who could be a super spreader, right? Or this person would actually be allowed to work from home. And this type of exceptional accommodation should be first before firing this person immediately, rapidly, right? But if you ever actually look at the cases in the different states, or even at a state level, things would be much, much tougher for us to actually recognize how this would go. But most of the states at this moment are underway to adopt the law that might actually, favor the circumstances of different employees. So how they would be better protected when their employers might mandate the vaccination against the coronavirus. How they would be better protected at their workplace in the face of a coronavirus vaccine mandate, all right? That means if there isn't a compulsory and unwanted immunization order issued by the company, would that be sufficient ground for giving this person a pink slip? Because of the immunization status. Most of the states are currently, allegedly, they're underway to author a bill that would protect the rights of workers. The workers' rights would be better protected by removing any immediate costs guaranteeing or justifying the removal of the workers from the workplace just because of the immunization status. That's what is underway. But many of the workers are actually tackling the safety of vaccines that are actually being approved in the United States. In the United States, currently, at least in 3 to 4 different vaccines were indeed approved, but one is really on hold. So currently all three of them that were actually authorized by the FDA are actually frequently traded in the medical system, right? So, those companies, they might actually wish their employees to be fully vaccinated, and their employees would actually get one of the shots from these 3 authorized vaccines, right? What are those? Moderna and BioNTech Pfizer and AstraZeneca, right? Was that a Johnson & Johnson? But Johnson & Johnson had a little problem. But, she didn't really specify what 3 of these are. But, however, one thing that I can guarantee with absolute certainty is all 3 of these vaccines were approved in the United States. I believe it's a Johnson & Johnson. But Johnson & Johnson is still right now being reviewed once more because of a current problem. But the thing is, all 3 of them are actually authorized because of the emergency of the condition. They were approved under the EUA. EUA means Emergency Usage Authorization. This is not for regular usage, but emergent usage. That means because of the very suppressing conditions. I mean, not really suppressing. When the coronavirus was at its peak, the most of authorities were very much pinched by the urgency of the situation. That was really the reason they felt the situation is very exigent and emergent. So they decided to issue an emergency usage authorization. That means these are really allowed under the condition of a very exceptional emergency. That means that there could be certain compromise that had been made through the process of authorization for all 3 of the vaccines that were currently approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Then certain people like to say that what if, a certain unexpected side effects would surface? What if, a certain unrecognized risk factors somehow and reveal their own existence? What if, someone like me who actually have a rare genetic disease conditions would be negatively affected because of these type of difficult or complicated calculations were not fully made due to the limited amount of time and energy at the time, because this is not really the vaccine that has been approved under normal conditions. This has been done in a very short amount of time. Then I expect many of the procedures were indeed compromised or abridged or abbreviated. There should have been a certain type of curtailment, right? It could have been curtailed, really. Think about it. Normally, the vaccine would really require at least 5 to 10 years to fully, screen out any negativity that might actually eventually create a totally unexpected circumstances, right? This is really probability games. So, they should actually try everything. Literally pull no punches. That was what was supposed to be done. What if, someone like me would be at the end of the day and I feel really vulnerable, and eventually this, factors would reveal themselves to harm my conditions. And that kind of argument is number one reason why many of our workers are refusing to get vaccinated, even in the face of this demand from their employers, right? These are lawsuits actually taking place across the nation. This is true. Station. What do I actually? So So, it's really kind of a difficult how we can at least, find us. At least, I have to honestly say this, it's very difficult to strike a balance between the public health and safety and freedom of individuals. How we can actually find the perfect common ground. That's a real difficulty. But indeed, many of companies are trying, many of these states in the United States are trying their very best to at least to shield any abuse of power by the company. How they could actually at least author a bill that could protect the people from being fired just because of their immunization status. Meanwhile, they've been actually looking into various options to better equip the companies with the different protections, so in that way they can actually resume their activities without actually exposing many people to coronavirus risks, right? So how they could actually minimize the risks, meanwhile at least guaranteeing the personal freedom. Either that would be driven by religious faith, or they were actually caused by health conditions. These are really the issues that are being considered. But nationwide, there is no specified rule. There is no clarified stipulation that would actually project a clearly predictable, order that must be obeyed at all costs. No. If you really want to be compliant with the law, then it would actually be better off to meet the demands from the states. I don't know what else I can actually say. That's all about it. Not risks. I think I got it. I have to go.